Good afternoon. I'm Jack Lavin, President and CEO of the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our most popular annual networking event, The Exchange. If there's anything 2020 has taught us, it's the power of perseverance. Chicago has always been known for its resilience, and the business community has once again demonstrated that we will innovate and continue to make good on our promises to our employees, customers, and partners. As we begin 2021, there is hope and a great deal of optimism as we look for a strong economic recovery. Chicagoland is a place unlike anywhere else in the world, made stronger by the businesses that plant their roots, hire and educate employees, and continually give back to our great city. We are a community that understands the importance of connecting, growing our networks, and learning. It is in this spirit that we reimagine the exchange to continue to meet these needs. This year, we've produced a virtual summit featuring outstanding speakers, engaging content, and an excellent group of exhibitors and unique opportunities to connect with other attendees and chamber members in real time. This would not have been possible without the generous support of our sponsors and exhibitors. Allow me to highlight a few. Presenting sponsor, Camelot. Network reception sponsor, DoorDash. Technology sponsor, Effective. Supporting sponsor, Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses. Panel discussion host sponsors, Cresco Labs, Kintone, and Novir. Networking lounge sponsor, GCG. While nothing can ever replace the experience of meeting in person and connecting with colleagues and customers face to face, thanks to these sponsors, we have been able to preserve the core elements of the exchange that you have told us matter so much. Over the next 2 days, you will have the opportunity to hear from fellow business leaders about their experiences managing through the pandemic, join in conversations and breakouts on a multitude of topics that can help you grow, and visit exhibitor showcases virtually to learn all about the great things our partners are doing. I also encourage you to visit the main stage for our 2 keynotes. Today, in just a few moments, you'll hear from our keynote panel on the future of the film industry in Chicago. The panel includes Leon Forde, Managing Director, Olsberg SPI, Sheila Brown, Executive Director of CineCares Foundation at Cinespace Chicago Film Studios, Brian O'Leary, Senior Vice President, Tax Counsel for NBC Universal Media, and Jay Roewe, Senior Vice President of Production and Incentives, HBO Warner Media. I am especially excited about this panel and want to thank Alex Pizios of Cinespace and a board member of the Chamber, and Chris Studley and the Illinois Production Alliance for putting this together. The film industry is a tremendous economic development success story in Illinois and Chicago. Tomorrow, for our keynote presentation, you'll hear from ComEd CEO Joe Dominguez on Chicago's clean energy and future. Most importantly, I invite you to connect. We have built this entire event around networking with your fellow attendees, and this technology platform is custom designed to make that as easy and fun as possible. Use all the ways that you can connect, including one-on-one video links, speed networking, group discussions, chats, and more. Visit our exhibitors. We have an awesome group, and this technology allows you to visit all of them and say hi very efficiently. I also want to take a moment to thank the entire Chamber staff who worked tirelessly to organize, reimagine, and put on Exchange 2021. They did a tremendous job. I also want to thank John Murray and Arena Partners who worked with us every step of the way to make this a success. I want to thank you again for your participation in the Exchange, supporting the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce, and for continuing to be the rock-solid foundation that supports our local economy. Have a great time networking, and I look forward to seeing you over the next couple of days. Thank you.
Good morning, and welcome to the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce's Exchange 2021. I am Keith Horton, General Manager of Camelot, Illinois, the private manager of the Illinois Lottery. I want to take the time today to thank our friends at the Chamber for all of the work they've done over the past year. Camelot is proud to support and be a sponsor at this year's Exchange 2021. To open this year's Exchange, we have an interesting panel this morning, the future of the Chicago film industry. In the current business climate, there are a multitude of changes happening, but one of the most positive changes in our community has been happening over the past 10 years, the film industry. Chicago's film industry has undergone a massive transformation where we have seen movies and shows being filmed locally. Most notably, Chicago PD, Chicago Fire, and Chicago Med, to name a few. These shows have provided a vehicle to both showcase our wonderful city and create jobs up and down the supply chain. Over the next 10 years, we anticipate the film industry will continue to evolve with respect to how we consume content. Please join me in watching this interesting panel on the future of the Chicago film industry, moderated by Leon Forde, Managing Director, Olsberg SBI. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. My name's Leon Forde. I'm Managing Director of Olsberg SBI. We are a specialist consulting firm that work in the screen sectors. I'm delighted to be moderating this discussion today. We have three very experienced panelists, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment. Just before we do, I'd like to give you a bit of context around this discussion. Olsberg SBI, we've been in business for nearly 30 years, and over that time we've seen a real shift in emphasis from government and legislators in the way they look at film and television production, away from something that's seen as being purely cultural into something that's really becoming a major economic development driver in many markets. We're living through a really unprecedented global boom in production. You'll all be aware of the increases we're seeing in film and high-end television drama production in the US and also on a global basis. In terms of the size of that, we did some analysis last year on the value of production in 2019 and concluded that screen production spend on film, TV drama and documentary alone, so not including sport or commercials, was up at around $177 billion. That drives economic impact of around $414 billion in 2019 and equates to around 14 million full-time equivalent jobs. So it's a huge sector globally. It creates a lot of value and it's driving a lot of jobs. The interesting thing about screen production spend is that a lot of the impact is flowing into sectors outside of screen production. So, you know, and our panelists can talk more about this, but the impact of a screen production in a jurisdiction flows to businesses in the travel sector, in hospitality, in catering, in financial services. You know, a lot of those sectors hit particularly hard by the pandemic, of course. So that's a bit of context. The panel today, we're going to be talking about the future of film in Chicago. But of course, for such a global industry, it's very much a global discussion in terms of the drivers and the opportunity for Chicago. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we can start digging into the opportunities presented by this sector. So Sheila, if we could turn to you first, please.
Good morning, Leon. Thank you for having me. I wanted to say to you, thank you for having us here today. I am the executive director of the CineCares Foundation over at Cinespace Chicago Film Studio. We are one of the largest studios in the country, occupying 70 acres or 2.2 million square feet here in Chicago with 42 sound stages, all full. And we are over there working hard and creating pathways as well for people to get into the industry. And we're excited to be here.
Great,
Hello,
thanks,
everyone.
Sheila. Sorry, Brian, if we could.
That's okay, Leon. Hello, everyone. I'm Brian O'Leary. I'm tax counsel with NBC Universal. So NBC Universal is a media and entertainment company. We're one of the contributors to the figures that Leon had just made reference to. And we're also a customer of Sheila's. As part of my responsibilities at NBC Universal, I spent a fair amount of time sorting through the various incentive regimes around the world that are calibrated to attract our industry's investment. And at this point, I think, Leon, at last count, there's over 97 programs. So there's a lot of material, but it's an important part of the decision-making for our company and for our industry is how these incentives play into our ability to put more value on the screen.
Thanks, Brian. And Jay, if we could turn to you next, please.
Good morning. Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I work at HBO Max now, the Senior Vice President of Production and Incentives. Been with HBO for 27 years. And what's been fascinating is the way that my job has evolved, coming out of production, now moving into the incentives world. And in the last 10 years, my job has very much evolved as these incentives, as Brian has just said, has evolved around the world. And now with the merger of us with AT&T, we've increased our production spend around the world, and the incentives and these kinds of programs are a completely driving force for us as we decide where we're going to place our productions, which is what I do on a daily basis with all of our production executives and producers. We look at what's happening in all of these different locales and work with the producers to figure out the best place to set up our productions. And so I liaise with Brian and his peers across the industry, constantly monitoring and keeping aware of what's going on. And I've had the personal fortune of getting to work with Sheila. We had a production there, and what she's doing is incredible, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that today. And she's right in the center of what's so important right now as this industry has expanded is to make sure that the local infrastructure and growth expands with the industry as a whole. So I look forward to talking more about that today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. It'd be great to kick off with a bit of context and a bit of future gazing. And Brian, as you made reference to, there's something like 97 incentives around the world, which really reflects how seriously legislators are taking this sector these days, and how much they're trying to attract the benefits that screen production can bring. Just turning to the growth, I mean, as we all know, during the various lockdowns in different countries around the world, consumer demand for content has been, really unprecedented. Where do you see us heading in terms of consumer demand and also the production growth that we've been witnessing? Jay, could we maybe come to you first on that?
Sure. I think it's been an unprecedented time for all of us and what we've gone through. And without question, people are at home, and we're all watching television in a way and media in a way that we've never had before. I think the other thing that's become quite apparent is how connected we are, not only through the virus, but through our media. And I think the reality is we're all watching global content in a way that we've never had before. And so what that has, what's happened to Brian and myself is this surge of just additional production everywhere. And with that comes, incredible opportunities, but also some challenges of how to expand as this kind of avalanche of need and want and spend is all occurring. The positive side is there's incredible opportunities. I'm seeing businesses enter our sector in ways they've never had before. I've seen larger businesses actually enter the sector because they realize what a growth sector it is. And then I see the trickle down effect, which has been a bit challenging. And what I mean by that is the need for the content means we need to get out there and produce. And so how do you produce in a challenging time such as this? So our sector has come up with extremely rigid protocols. But for the most part, I think governments everywhere around the world realize how important this sector is, that we're bringing jobs, we're stimulating the economy. So we've been working hand in hand with governments all around the world to allow this infrastructure to get up and moving. Bottom line being said, though, is that there are a lot of opportunities here in which we can talk about today. But When we bring one of our productions into town, yes, we're bringing some cast and some crew, but then we have to engage with everything from the hotels to transportation to all the goods and services. And we'll get into that today, but it's an incredibly fascinating moment in the media landscape. And I think the virus has just kind of brought it all to the forefront that much more. And our companies see this, and there's just a lot of investment and money flowing through this sector at the moment.
And Brian or Sheila, in terms of that growth trajectory that Jay references, do you agree with that? You see this opportunity in production terms as an ongoing thing?
Absolutely. I often tell people that over at the studio of Cinespace back in 2011, that studio opened and it started to grow with network television. So we were kind of on a cycle of working with the networks, and there was 10 months out of the year basically that there was business, and then 2 months of downtime to reset. But with the advent of all of the streaming services and so forth, it's a 24 hour a day, 12-month a year business now. And the content that needs to be produced for each of these streaming services and networks are tremendous amounts. And so the business goes up, and then that means all of the auxiliary services that are available in a city where you have a production facility, such as ours and others, that can grow and build along with it. As Jay mentioned, people are getting in and they're sustaining their businesses through working in this industry that they probably never considered before.
Yeah.
So Leon, I'll just add a few comments to my friends and colleagues' observations. And one is just getting to government's perspectives. You could discern that what has historically been the relationship between this industry and government is we've been a tool for economic development. And we've seen sort of a changing perspective over this past year. Through the course of the pandemic, a number of governments have really seen this industry and our ability to respond in a very immediate way, in a responsible way from a health perspective, as a catalyst for recovery. And you've seen governments sort of calibrate their programs in a way to attract our investment at the earliest opportunity. And I think the numbers speak for themselves. The industry has responded in a way that's been pretty meaningful in those jurisdictions which are focused on attracting our investment. And that investment, to Jay's point, if you think about it on a per project basis, it was just a few years ago that the idea of an episode costing $10 million it was the exception. And because of the advent and the proliferation of streaming services and the demand of viewers, it's incredible to say it's almost commonplace. And if you think about projects that are running 8, 10, 15 episodes, the numbers really do add up. That's what contributes to the figures, Leon, that you were referring to. And just in terms of the volume, there's been a lot of talk over the last handful of years about what is peak television and when have we reached our apex. Jay and Sheila, I don't see that happening in the immediate future. I think the demand for content will continue. And just to put it in context, look back at numbers. In 2002, there were 182 scripted series in production. And in 2019, there were 530, and by most measures, we'll be at 600 next year. So the volume and the cost per project are just extraordinary. What represents the opportunity that's been so appealing for so many governments is how we spend that money, what Jay referred to. We bring in as few people as possible because it's not cost efficient for us to bring in talent and people below the line. So that's a real opportunity for economic development.
Just one last point to pick up on what Brian said was, right before the pandemic hit, we were at, in essence, an all-time peak in terms of the amount of production going on, employing people, and so on and so forth. And obviously it ground to a halt. But literally in the last few weeks, I would say we are surging back. And there are many, many sectors and areas around the country right now which are beyond where we were back in March. In other words, we have started up. There have been some shows that obviously for creative reasons we felt this isn't quite the right time, so we pushed a few of those off. But we've then started other shows which are more kind of pandemic friendly in a sense of being able to do the production. But we're, as we scour the world right now, we're at there's peak infrastructure in a lot of places where we weren't even at peak before. So we've come surging back.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think it would be great to dig in a bit more to what that impact on the ground looks like. I mean, we've spoken about the global picture, which is this incredible rise in production, and the incredible amount of budget that's being spent on some of these shows. But for for a jurisdiction that's able to attract a significant show, with a $10 million budget per episode, perhaps, it would be great to talk about your experiences of what that looks like on the ground. I mean, we've done some analysis around how budgets are spent, and I think something like 70% on average flows outside the screen sector, as I said earlier. So, it's a really, it's a real opportunity to get economic impact flowing to a number of other sectors. But it'd be great to, if you could tell us a bit about, for your shows, how, your experience of how that budget moves into and around an economy.
I can take a stab at that first, and then Brian, you can help me. And let's be, since we're talking here in Illinois, why don't we talk about, productions coming here as well. So first off, I think Illinois is very well positioned, literally for a number of reasons. One, geographically where it is. We have many productions which we often talk about, we often, in every production, where do we best shoot this production? And I think Chicago and Illinois is very well suited because there are a lot of stories which take place in the Midwest. And because of the design of the incentive program here, also, secondly, because of the infrastructure, Chicago is probably as well positioned, along with Illinois, as kind of one of the center focus places we immediately talk about when we talk about shooting anywhere in the middle of the country. Along with that then comes the infrastructure issue and challenge. And so when we come and we place one of our businesses, and I always like to refer to each of our productions as a business, so when you're thinking in business terms, we're deciding where we're going to place that $75 to $100 million business. Every one of these productions, we think of that way. And when we come to spend, yes, it's obviously we are going to hire crew. We're going to hire some cast. There's a rich history of acting here in Chicago, which makes it a wonderful center of support from an acting standpoint. But when you talk about all the other industries, I think very quickly, if one were to take a look at a budget sheet and start to literally go department by department, art department, okay, well, they need where are they going to build their sets? Are we going to be on location? Are there stages? So what is the stage situation? And if you don't have stages and run out of that, we quickly pivot off to warehouses. So what it takes to run that warehouse, what it takes to run that stage. Then we need to build the set. So we have construction people now that need to build the set. Then we have set decorators, people that are going to go out into the community. They're going to buy props. They're going to buy set dressing. They're going to buy furniture. We just had a fascinating story in the last week pop up in New York about a small antique store. We're doing a production there, and all of a sudden his business blew up in a very positive way because all of a sudden the set dresser and prop people were in there buying period antiques for this production we were doing, and it literally had changed his business overnight. And then as you scale down through the production, the wardrobe department, we're going to hire seamstresses. We're going to go buy clothing. We're going to buy material to build the clothing. We're going to have people potentially even build the clothing. Then the makeup and hair department and all the people that are going to work who have hair and makeup backgrounds. And then we need to move the whole crew around. So we need a whole set of truck drivers and trucks and vans. And then we need to feed everybody. So we need caterers, and we need to buy the food, and we need to cook the food. And very quickly you start to see how this scales out. And we need to house people. So we're going to put them in apartments, or we're going to use a hotel. And then they're on the weekends, they're going to go off and they're going to do, if they have the opportunity, they're going to do some things in their spare time to entertain themselves. A little challenging in this environment, but people, we all get pretty resourceful. And then obviously, and Chicago is also well suited, you can potentially even finish the production in Chicago. You've got a great post-production community there, which can benefit from the incentive. So I'm just very quickly just trickling through things, but all of a sudden, these are all parts of the economic chain that get touched by a production like this. And I think people often think about what happens in front of the camera and think of the crew. But, and then of course, all the grip and lighting that needs to happen, and maybe some cranes and so on. So there, it's very much a production touches all of these aspects of the economy. It can be very stimulating as we pour not just thousands, but millions of dollars into all of these different areas.
Yeah, and it's amazing that, you know, thinking of that impact, that could all be entirely additional. You know, if a jurisdiction is able to attract that production that may have gone to another state or another country, all of that impact is completely additional to that place, which is, you know, hugely impactful. I'd like to just pick up on the job side, because obviously, Jay, the impacts you outlined very well there have very strong job implications, and obviously one of the key reasons for governments or legislators supporting this sector is to create jobs. You know, and it's a fairly unique sector in the spread of jobs it can create from, you know, as you say, from construction to catering to very high, you know, levels of specialist skills, maybe in post-production or camera or whatever it may be. I mean, could you talk a bit more, maybe Sheila or Brian, about the type of jobs generated by this sector?
I believe, Leon, you hit it on the nail, you know, and hit the nail on the head in that there is almost, I tell people, whatever job you have, there's probably a place for it in the television industry. You know, if you're a home builder, you know, and you can do construction, there is work for you. If you're a painter, there's work for you, an electrician. If you're a caterer, if you're a hairstylist or makeup artist, if you're a landscaper, we have a greens department, you know, there's just, it runs the gamut, and people often think of those creative jobs. When I speak at places, I say, what do you know about the industry? They generally, you know, name actors and producer, director, camera person. And then I have to say to them, well, who transports them, you know, to the sets? Who feeds them? Who dresses them? Who builds the sets that they act on, and so forth. So it's a very blue collar industry. Yes, you have the above the line jobs where people are the cinematographer and such, but the majority of those 300 people that you mentioned are the everyday hardworking, get in there and grind people. And so there is a position for almost any skill set there is in the industry. And then even on the production side, you know, of being in the office as office assistants and things of that nature. So I don't think there is a job, you know, or very many of them that this sector does not touch and cannot invite in.
And Brian, does that align with your experience as well?
For sure. And I wanted to, on a particular point that Sheila made about the assistants, you know, one perspective that's perhaps lost on the, you know, the public in general is, even though this industry is totally focused on its convergence with technology and the capabilities that technology brings and the opportunities in local economies, it's still very much an apprenticeship-based industry. And everyone starts at the entry level with the production assistant position. One thing that's been important for us as an industry is making sure that when we're investing in a local community, that the building blocks for that workforce, that we allow the opportunity for production assistants on set in the office to learn the protocols, how to work on a set, how to read a script, how to navigate the contours of working in the film industry. And that's where everyone starts. And that is very much an important part of our ability to grow the workforce, is starting at that entry level.
Yeah, that's...
I
Sorry,
also,
Jay.
Leon, yeah, just one thing to add to what Brian said, and I think this is one of the phenomenons that we're starting to see, and I think Sheila can speak to this. As Brian well said, you know, at those entry level positions, there are so many different entry level points. And so we are as an industry, we're really reaching deeply out to organizations and people like Sheila who can introduce us to people, wanting to get in the industry. But one of the things I really want to stress is it isn't necessarily an industry that at 22 years old is the only entry level point. And I think with the challenge of what's happening in our economic industry right now, as some industries are feeling incredible strain and stress, this is an industry that you can enter at 30, 35, 40, 45. You can retool, as just we said, if you have a set of skills, a greensman, somebody knows how to landscape. Well, if you know how to landscape and then you learn very quickly the protocols about how we do our work, we can take a landscaper and turn them into a greensman, within weeks because of the apprentice side of the industry. I'll never forget a story. We were in New York and we had a veteran who was, I think he was in his early, somewhere in his 40s. He came onto the crew. They were so impressed with his discipline, his maturity, his thoughtfulness, and his skill set. Within a few months, he was in the union. And he had simply taken his set of skills, figured out where they worked in our industry, and quickly adapted. All of a sudden, he's getting a very good paycheck. And so I really want to emphasize that, yes, we want to make sure, and we really more than ever, we need to reach deeply into youth and people entering our industry. But this is an industry you can enter at any age, and utilize those skills, and be resourceful.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And the comment on this really being a blue collar industry, I think that's, that chimes with the work that we do at Olsberg SPI. I mean, we often describe production as a sort of specialist manufacturing activity. And one of the things about this sector that has made governments sit up and take note is that the jobs being created are very high quality jobs, and they're really jobs of the future, and that they're not at risk from automation or robotics. They generally require quite a lot of sort of human skill that you need an individual in the role to do that. And Jay, to your point about it being an industry for right across the age groups, I think we're seeing a lot of examples of that as well. There's schemes to try and get veterans into the industry because, as you say, their logistical skills and focus are very highly valued. In the UK, where I'm from, we have a really interesting scheme here to get airport workers into the industry, because obviously they have a special experience in logistics and things like that. So I think it's a really interesting time from a job perspective. There's so much going on in this industry that that getting the necessary skills into it is a really interesting piece. I'd like to move on to picking up on the workforce side and pathways into the industry, and maybe ask the panelists about how those pathways are looking now, because things are so busy that previously it was considered a bit of a tricky industry to break into, but I think such is the need for skills and workers now that it is becoming a bit more easy to get into from different backgrounds. I just wondered what the panelists thought of how those pathways were being connected, with different with different groups of people.
Well, I think, Leon, one of the things that we focus on, especially at Cinespace, is creating pathways. To your point, this industry is mystifying to many people. And they think, how do I get in? And they just dream of getting in and don't necessarily know a pathway upon which to get in. And there are those avenues that previously existed from film programs. Believe it or not, many people get into this industry just by knowing someone in it. I always say this is truly a business of who makes a difference, because people tend to hire people that they know, hire their friends and or family, just people they can depend on and so forth. So if you don't know people in the industry, it is often very difficult to navigate for anyone looking for entrance into the industry. But for us, Cinespace is located in the middle of the southwest side of Chicago, where we're in a community where the average household industry is less than $23,000 a year. So it's almost criminal to bring a business in that can, produce the levels of money for and revenue for this state without taking a moment and say, how do we help these people that are around the studio and let them know that they're welcome here? They may not have thought they had a pathway, but let's create one for them. Let's build the bridge. And that's what we did at the studio through our CineCares program. And what was so critically important to us, and it speaks to kind of what Jay was saying, is you don't have to be, for every job that's in this industry, someone that studied filmmaking for years. You have to be a hard worker. You have to be a person that can work with all types of people under all types of pressure and so forth, and be dependable, and you can find a job in this industry. For us, very specifically, we were looking to do two things, and both can be done and both speak separately, to help diversify the industry, but in addition, help build a skill within the industry, build more of a workforce so that more productions can come to Chicago. It's not either or, they're both. They're diverse and they're highly skilled. And we have done that through working with traditional workforce companies and organizations that are in the city of Chicago that traditionally train people to go work for the CHA or public utility companies and so forth. And we've said, consider this industry. If you've got someone that's willing to work hard, our internship has a minimum of 60 hours a week, so if you're willing to get someone in there that can grind and work hard, they can be taught the applicable skills and build a career. You come in with no skills. For example, our internship program, you come in making minimum wage. Well, over 60% of our people who have come in and trained for union positions are now union apprentices. So where you have the Friday when they leave making $14 an hour plus overtime, making our minimum wage, when they get into the union and come back that following week, they're making almost $40 an hour plus overtime. And our internship is 24 weeks. So 6 months later, they've completely transformed not only their lives, but their family lives. So it's one of those things where this is an industry where we're not producing widgets per se, but every production is a business, as Jay said. Every production, has employees that come in and work on it, some very highly skilled and some just needing people that can hustle and grind. And if you can do that, you can find a way into the industry and make a very good living. Once you're in the union, you have union wages, you have insurance, you have benefits and so forth that are to you that one would have never considered.
And how many young people have been through those internships, Sheila?
Well, to date, we have put approximately 55 people through the program. 51 of them have finished successfully or are finishing successfully because we have a group that's in there now. So we have a 90% success rate, Leon, with saying to people, let's go out and get people who we didn't traditionally look at because they weren't in film programs and so forth. Just folks that have been referred to us as very hard workers. Let's bring them in, let's train them, and let's see if we can get them into the unions. So at this particular point, we have 90% of them that went through that have finished. Over 80% of them are working full seasons on shows. And as more productions come into the city, there are more opportunities to place them. Our numbers are regulated by how many productions we have to work with. So it's not something where we can arbitrarily say, we'll hire 50 people and get 50 interns. It's how many productions can give us the positions to train the people. But we have had that many and they're going through and they're working. And as additional productions come in, Power's starting. They started yesterday on their season 1. They took interns. 61st Street is starting in March. They took interns. So it's no longer, excuse me, simply the networks that are working. It's all of these services and the AMCs and the Lion Gates and so forth that are taking interns as well. So it's building and building.
Leon, if I can just jump on the back of what
Sure.
you've been saying, I think at this point, workforce development is absolutely crucial for us right now. There are not enough people in our industry to fill all the jobs. We're having to bring people in. And so I think there was a great vision of having Sheila there with CineCares being placed right in the studio. We could walk down the hall and talk to her. But we're seeing this happen across our industry in many of the places. And we're starting to talk to the government now even more about how to create more of these workforce development programs. And it's not, again, it's not a 3, 4, 5 year. This can happen in a matter of months. And the demand is sitting there right in front of us. So we are really looking, and I'm starting to see more programs like Sheila's develop, but I think Sheila's is uniquely positioned. And again, what we're also, and I think something else to emphasize that Sheila talked upon, is this issue of the kinds of people, and we do use the word diverse, but we're talking, what's happening is the content is crossing all kinds of genres, all kinds of different strata of people and societies. And we really, at the end of the day, we need the artists and the people working them to also reflect that, because they're going to bring that much more to the artistic process. So the idea of a variety of people, ages, cultural backgrounds, and so on, we have that need. But we do need some help with people like Sheila to help us with that. And so whether it's a traditional workforce development program or something much more catered to our industry, we're open to it. And we need organizations, and we're reaching out in every city where we're filming to find out what other kind of workforce or training programs or skills programs you have out there. So it's a very opportunistic time for people. But we look for those partnerships. It's really, really helpful because we've got a production to do, but we are very open to training and working with people to get them into our industry. It benefits everybody. It benefits us. It benefits the people in the communities we're filming in. It benefits the states and the countries where we're filming.
And Illinois is fairly unique in having an additional kind of uplift in the value of the tax credit for employees who live in areas of high unemployment, I understand. Just with one eye on the clock, I'd just like to ask a final question of the panelists. And we've, it's been really interesting. You've established the kind of global scale of this opportunity. It would be great to end by asking you what Chicago can do as a city to attract more of this production that's happening, and and generate more of this economic and kind of job creation value that we've been talking about. Maybe Brian, if I could come to you first.
I'm happy to. Well, first I would say, just by virtue of the scale of the industry pre-pandemic, I think Illinois and Chicago enjoyed a record year of over $500 million worth of production spending. Certainly continuing that trajectory post-pandemic. To Jay's point, the industry is back in force, and the idea that we could double that is certainly, I would expect, an aspiration that should be strived for. And the scalability of the workforce, by equal measure, the scalability of our supply chain. And that's something, Leon, making sure that the business community understands the relationship between this industry and the local marketplace. If you look at the life cycle of our Chicago One franchise, over a 6-year period, we had over 7,000 unique suppliers. The vast majority of those are small and medium businesses. We spent over $250 million. But understanding the relationships, the hours that this industry keeps, the timing to delivery, what we need is so important. It's the ability for the film office, which in partnership with the state film office does a great job of collaborating and getting our message out, but making sure that the business community understands that we certainly see ourselves an important part of the economic fabric of the city. And there's so much opportunity to scale up our supply chain and understanding what this business's needs are and how it can be met across the community of businesses in the city.
To pick up on Brian, I think certainly one of the things we've noticed in the industry is that there's been some real vision in Illinois, vision in terms of creating the incentive, creating programs like CineCares. Also with the people that have been in the business, I think they've realized the need for growth. And so there's been some very wise investments to build out infrastructure from the standpoint of stages, as well as support services. I also want to emphasize what Brian said. I think because of the small and medium businesses, something to really think about is that we are a creative industry, and every single production is a little bit different. And so for those vendors that can kind of lean in and understand what our needs are, if you are able to satisfy our needs or provide what we need, we are going to reach out to you very quickly, and we will be spending a lot of money with you. But you've got to figure out where you fit into that cycle. And that's sometimes a little bit of the challenge, but we're very open to those discussions. We're a dynamic business, and so I would encourage people to reach out, and through people like Sheila or the producers on the ground, what can you do to help us? And we're going to tell you, we need more of this, we need more of that. But I think there's been a lot of vision in Illinois, and I think that vision is there on the ground. And we look forward to keeping this one of our top priority places to film in the States.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Brian. And Sheila, anything to add just before we wrap up?
What Jay was just saying about small to medium-sized businesses, I would encourage anyone who's interested in partnering with the industry and becoming a supplier of sort to do a little homework, do a little research on their services that they have and how that fits into this industry. And they're not going to know all of the answers, absolutely not. And that's where it comes into reaching out to the state film office, the city film office, and so forth, and getting them to help them understand how they might be able to supply this industry. But understanding that your service may be needed and in what kind of way, and if you're able to meet that need, that's a critical first step when you're doing that. And then I see for growth in this industry is more infrastructure, as Jay and I'm sure Brian as well said, infrastructure is what we need in Chicago. We at Cinespace are looking at additional space to develop more stages and skilled labor. And we all have that goal of getting more skilled labor. Yes, I focus my programming on creating diversity, but to Jay's earlier point, there are people that are of all ages and backgrounds that can make a career in this business. And I know that the city in particular is focused on getting some pathways for people that are above my age limit of 26 of the youth that I work with, and making access points for them as well. So we have our eyes on a lot of different avenues for supplementing the industry in Chicago. But to Brian's point, it's growing like wildfire. We at the studio, the unions and so forth, we're all gearing up, because once we get this pandemic under control and the top comes off and we can pull the Band-Aid off, we're going to be moving at whiplash pace. So now's the time to consider it and get in there, because we're going to be running like we got our pants on fire.
Well, on that note, I think it's a very positive note to end this discussion. Growing like wildfire, and as you say, the vision that's already apparent in Illinois and in Chicago makes it very well placed to keep building the impact. So I think all that's left for me is to say thank you to our panelists. Those insights have been so valuable and really, really interesting. So thank you all so much. Thank you to the Chicagoland Chamber. I'd like to hand back over to Jack. Thank you.
What a terrific keynote panel to kick off the exchange. The film industry has grown from 25 million in 2002 to almost 600 million. There is a tremendous opportunity for all our businesses to grow with them. Thank you to Managing Director of Olsberg SPI, Leon Forde, for joining us from London to moderate today's discussion about this important and rapidly growing industry. And thank you to our panelists, Sheila Brown, Brian O'Leary, and Jay Roewe, for such a stimulating and insightful perspective on the future of film in Chicago. And thank you again to Alex Pizios of Cinespace and Chris Dudley of the Illinois Production Alliance for organizing our panel. I also want to thank our Chamber Board member, Keith Horton of Camelot, for opening today's keynote panel and serving as our presenting sponsor. As I mentioned earlier, this event is entirely built around networking. Our technology platform makes it easy to connect, and as an added bonus, we're giving away a pair of round-trip tickets daily, courtesy of Southwest Airlines. You'll hear how you can win these in just a moment. We invite you to make connections using the one-to-one networking area or visit our excellent group of exhibitor showcases and learn more about the myriad of offerings available to you and your organization. Once you meet someone, be sure to connect with them, both here during the exchange and after on LinkedIn or email. The connections you make today will help your business tomorrow. If you are like me and sometimes have trouble with technology, need help navigating through our platform, or have other questions, please call 800-306-5595 and our team will assist. And finally, please take advantage of the breakout sessions at 3 o'clock with topics and information ranging from cybersecurity to keeping an audience engaged in a virtual format. Thank you again and enjoy your networking this afternoon.
Thank you, Jack. We are very excited about this year's exchange. So as an incentive to take advantage of all the opportunities to network and make connections, the Chamber is going to award the individual with the greatest number of connections with 2 round-trip tickets on Southwest Airlines each day of the exchange. A connection means that you and another person have accepted an invitation to connect. A request to someone to connect that doesn't respond is not considered a connection. Take advantage of this networking opportunity to make meaningful connections and to promote your business and possibly win 2 round-trip tickets. We will announce the winner at the end of each day, day 1 and day 2. Enjoy the day. Hawaii sounds pretty good right about now, doesn't it?